Do you want to be part of something bigger? At Siemens, we use AI to transform the everyday. Our engineering solutions drive innovation and change. We're leading in technology and building a sustainable future. Join Siemens and make an impact to transform the everyday. Apply now and be part of something extraordinary. Visit siemens.co.in/careers.
There are places where the world's most gruesome crimes have led to years, decades, and sometimes even centuries of supernatural activity. The victims seemingly reaching out from beyond the grave for justice. Those locations are In Creepy Places, a true crime podcast, and I am your host, John Grills. Join me in these creepy places if you dare, as we dive deep into the epicenter of true terror.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe.
And I'm Jen.
We're co-hosts of Murder Made Fiction, a podcast that looks at fictionalized adaptations of true crime.
That's Murder Made Fiction wherever you get your podcasts.
And until then, let's leave the murder on the screen.
Slashers, huh? What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
And welcome back to Microqueers. It's your sporadic queer horror roundup, and I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we are, doing our regular microqueers and covering a new queer indie horror film called The Exorcism of Saint Patrick, written and directed by Quinn Armstrong.
Yeah, this has been an interesting one because it is the first of a trilogy, but each film is a bit of a standalone, so we're only talking about this first one.
Yeah, I was really confused by that at first because I was like, well, shit, does the story continue? But based on the way this movie ends, I'm gonna guess the answer is no.
No. Apparently they form some kind of world, but you don't need to have seen the other ones to make sense of it.
That's a mighty ambitious task for a film this small, or a trilogy this small, wouldn't you say, Joe?
I guess so. Yeah. I'll confess I didn't look closely enough to see if Quinn Armstrong is behind all three of them. I believe they are, but at the same time, I don't know. It's given me slight Fear Street vibes, and I'm not unhappy about it.
Yeah, not at all. But everyone, before we get too much further, just a quick log line for this film. So, what this is about. So we have Pastor Patrick, played by Steve Grease, taking Trick, Michael J. Klein, a young gay teen, to a cabin to perform conversion therapy on him. When the pastor's harsh tactics bully Trick into taking his own life, so content warning for suicide here, the ghosts of the conversion camp's many victims, including Alana, played by Maya Jayham, return for vengeance. And I would say, Joe, that's almost a bit of a spoiler, but it's in the logline for the film.
It truly is, yeah. Like, this is just tweaked to include actor and character names. I was surprised that they spoil it because that suicide doesn't happen until, I want to say, halfway through the film.
I feel like it's almost the hour mark. And this is like a tight 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But at the very least, though, I'll just come right out and say it, Joe. So I am going to recommend this movie, and I think I'll remember this. But you know, we've talked a lot about how a lot of these queer horror films we're doing are kind of like, we're seeing this conversion camp, conversion therapy, aversion therapy, what have you, a lot. And
yes,
I'm getting, I don't want to say bored with it because it sounds like maybe like offensive, but I am getting
burnt out.
Thank you. I'm getting burnt out with this as the kind of go-to plot for queer horror films, and that this one does something a little different made it stand out in a very good way for me.
Yeah, and folks, if you're like, wait, what the fuck are they talking about? So this is definitely a trend that we've been experiencing in these micro-queer shorts. So we talked about Ganymede, we talked about Killer Body Count, and then there's another film that's doing the festival circuit that's due to drop on Shudder sometime this year called Haze. And they all either use this as a bit of a inciting incident / premise, and or that's really what the whole film is about. And I would argue each of them is doing it in their own way.
Yeah.
Some a little bit more successfully than others. But yeah, I agree with you. This one does feel a little bit distinct. And I was happy to hear that you liked it because I watched it first and I was worried that some of this was just a little too low budget for you and that you might be kind of turned off.
You know, it was, but because we're mostly dealing with two actors for most of this film's runtime, it gave me very much like filmed play vibes. Like this kind of like, and that to me helps build suspense. You know, I don't need like a whole cast of characters. Just give me two characters just acting their asses off. And it mostly worked for me here.
Okay. You know what? Actually, I'm glad that you said that because it didn't occur to me until you said it that this is the sort of smallest cast that we've seen outside of maybe Haze. And again, folks, you can hear it down the road. But I wonder if sometimes these films bite off more than they can chew by having a large cast and then not being able to balance everybody while still, I guess, doing right by the story's themes and narrative.
Yeah, I say so. I mean, again, like you said, though, these films are doing the conversion therapy thing in their own way. So Killer Body Count is very much a slasher film doing it this way. Ganymede is more of this lifetime drama with horror elements kind of way of doing it. Whereas Haze is more of kind of like an art house cinema kind of realm with mostly working with a single actor.
Right. Yes. Very atmospheric, but also a little bit hallucinatory, which you and I are also slightly burnt out by that.
Sure. But nevertheless, the fact that, and this may be the controversial aspect of the Exorcism of Saint Patrick, is that our queer character Trick, again, Michael J. Klein, isn't necessarily the focal point of this film. We do shift into, let's see how the bad guy, how he deals with all of this stuff. Because, the big turning point in this plot is when Trick decides to take his own life after undergoing aversion therapy when conversion therapy doesn't work. And for the last 30-ish minutes of this movie, we follow the pastor, the one who is the perpetrator in this film.
Yeah, and of course, he's being haunted by the ghosts of these teens. We discovered that he's been leading this kind of specialty camp for quite an exorbitant sum of money, we're led to believe. So he takes these individual teens out for a week at a time, and then he's more or less tasked with getting results, or his job is on the line. So it's like he's beholden to success. So he basically has to force the issue with these teens, whether or not they actually want to convert, whether or not they respond to the treatment. So it's interesting to see that storyline. But yeah, we're very much meant to be concerned for his safety and care about what happens to him. And I did not feel that way for him at all. I was very much siding with the neighbor woman who was like, do you have a teen in there? Is that teen okay?
Yeah, no, I was the exact same. So, but a question though, Joe. So do you think the film is asking us to empathize with this man by the end of its runtime?
I don't know if it's actually asking us to empathize, but it is inviting us to, I guess, care about what happens to him. Maybe not to say, I want to see this person saved. But I guess one of the things I found surprising about this film is that the way that this role of Pastor Patrick is played by Steve Greist, he himself comes off as maybe closeted queer. And I thought that that's what we were going to explore, that he's been doing this to teens and he actually is hating himself. And that's not the case. He's just like a bad religious figure who is inadvertently or possibly accidentally killing kids.
And I appreciated that aspect because, again, I mean, look at Ganymede. That's also another one where it's like, the perpetrator's like this secretly closeted gay man. Or in Killer Body Count, it's incest twins. But so I didn't get the feeling that the film was asking us to empathize with him, but I did. It almost felt like this kind of revenge style movie in a way where we were watching this man get his comeuppance.
Yes.
Even though the people that he had harmed were already dead.
And the fact that we don't know much about them aside from Trick. And Trick is often filtered through his interactions with Pastor Patrick.
Very much so. So I don't know. We can talk about the execution, but just as a basic, like, this is what we're doing here, I really appreciated it after this kind of run of similar-ish themed films we've dealt with.
Okay. Yeah. No, I agree. I guess I hadn't really thought of it that way. I was more focused on how I felt after Trick exits the narrative and whether or not I was still enjoying more or less being stuck with Pastor Patrick, because it gets, well, because as we said, it's a two-hander. So at that point, he's just kind of confronted with ghosts, but he's not really interacting with them because he doesn't want to either engage with them or he doesn't believe it's actually happening. So it's a bit odd. It ends up becoming almost a one-man movie for the back half.
It very much does. I mean, because we have the ghosts kind of coming, which again, with that logline, I was expecting a lot more ghosts, not just one and then also Trick.
Yes.
But nevertheless, where it ends, I was kind of happy with. I thought we were going to do this redemptive arc for Pastor Patrick, and we don't.
Absolutely not. No, this guy just gets brutally fucking murdered, and maybe this is a good opportunity to bring in the fact that we do have some pretty good practical gore effects, courtesy of Dave Greathouse, who is responsible for stuff like the killing of a sacred deer and Wrong Turn.
That's interesting, because there's not a ton of gore in this film, but when it is there, like, it's impactful. I also thought that this was, like, I don't know, kind of a very beautifully shot movie. Like, I mean, it's not the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, but, like, I just thought that it was maybe done a little bit better than I would have expected before I turned on the movie.
Yeah, if you watch the trailer, it does. I feel like you and I struggle sometimes with the language around independent film. Like, we'll make concessions where we'll say, oh, it looks better than I expected it to, because we know that they didn't have a ton of money. But, you know, I think some of these films are proving us wrong in that they don't have a lot of money, but they can look very good. I thought that the interior of the cabin scenes didn't look great. I don't know if it was a bit of an issue with the lighting, but when they were outside, and particularly, you know, the shots of the forest, the shots of the lake, when Trick makes a run for it in the middle of the night, there's really good stuff with the atmosphere outside of the cabin. And maybe that's by design, and it's supposed to feel kind of claustrophobic and a little bit icky and grimy inside, but that worked best for me when Trick is undergoing aversion therapy in the bathroom, and it just looks like a Saw film.
Right, those blues and greens, right?
Yeah, the blues and the greens, and then somebody who's kind of like chained in there and just being sick all over himself. By the way, probably the most visceral reaction I have had to someone vomiting in a horror film in a while.
We do some extreme close-ups of the contents of the vomit, and it is, I was not expecting that. But again, it is very, very, very effective.
Agreed. Yeah.
But so what about Greased and Klein, though? So how did these two actors work for you?
So, okay. One of the other things that we have not said anything about is that the depiction of a queer teen, I think you and I naturally end up thinking it's going to be one type of character, right? Mm-hmm. A little bit maybe fey, a little bit, you know, conventionally good looking. Like, I guess I'm thinking of the action from Ganymede, where you're like, this boy looks like he could be on a CW show.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I really appreciated about this is that Michael J. Klein is a fat actor. And he is also, I mean, we don't know if the actor is queer, but the character is not falling into stereotype in that way. You know, you were quick to remind me when I said, oh, it feels like a very different kind of portrayal of a queer teen. And you're like, well, there's still that moment where we read out his text to somebody and that says, you know, I want to swallow your dick.
And until I choke on it.
Until I choke on it. Which I was like, oh, okay, relatable content. But I thought Klein was really refreshing just because we don't often see fat queer youth. And I really appreciated that.
I completely agree. Yeah. Before I had started the movie, I had this vision in my head of what Trick was going to look like. And this wasn't it. So I'm actually really happy to get this different kind of physical representation. And even again, like in a non-effeminate way, you know, he is not, outside of those text messages, like is not the stereotypical Hollywood depiction of a queer teen that we normally see in these types of films.
Yeah. And I think that his interactions with Pastor Patrick are believable, right? Like, he tries to go along with the therapy, and then when he starts to make progress, quote unquote, he'll say, so I think I'm actually feeling much better. Can I go home now? And you know, at one point he even tries to run away in the night because he doesn't think it's working. And also he wants to get the fuck out of there. So there's some good stuff in terms of the way these two play off of each other. And I like that Pastor Patrick isn't mustache twirling. You know, you do get the impression he genuinely thinks he can help these kids up until the point push comes to shove and he's like, no, I've got to make this work. So I'm going to go overboard.
I agree with you, but at the same time, and maybe it's because, again, like I've been seeing so many like of these manipulative methods of these characters in these conversion therapy movies where I'm like, I believe that he believes he's doing it right, but there are times in those conversations, you know, when that he has the trick where he is being very, very manipulative.
Yes.
Or you know, when he's like, hey, you know, if you want to go home, you can go home. I do want to go home. Okay, but like
you are going to go to hell if you go home.
And also your parents are like, they're not going to be as nice as I am, like blah, blah, blah. And so it's like the thing where it's like, this person is without a doubt like an absolute asshole.
Yeah, I guess the thing that surprised me was that when we get further into the film, I definitely believe that this was, he's just not great at this because he's a bit of a novice. And that's proven not to be the case. He's done this to multiple teens and accidentally killed many of them. Either that or some other people have been killing teens in this same way, and the ghosts are just kind of gathered in this spot. It's not entirely clear.
It's not entirely clear, but yeah, but that being said, like those last 30 minutes I did enjoy because I'm just watching this man finally
get his comeuppance.
Yeah, get his comeuppance. And so, I don't know, I kind of wanted it to go more into snuff film territory, but what we end with is good enough because, yeah, he's when we get that shot of his body, it looks like he's been flayed by the Predator.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the other big moment of gore, right, is when we finally see what happened to him. Because initially we just see him get lifted up and it looks a little bit Conjuring possession movie style thing. And it looks good, but it's also a little bit familiar. But then when we cut to the aftermath and see what has happened to him, it looks like they have cut him open, removed the skeleton, and just kind of left the rest.
Right, but then we get a close-up of a finger that just looks like it's a regular hand that has, like, blood on it. And I was like, oh, we don't need that. Like, just leave it away. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, just give us the long shot with the mutilated corpse, and we're happy.
Now, we stick mostly, again, with Patrick and Trick for most of this runtime, but there are a couple of insert flashbacks where we go back to Patrick meeting with Trick's parents. And I was wondering, did that kind of take you out of the moment, Joe?
A little bit. We don't get it until, I want to say, after Trick has died. I could be wrong.
If not, it's very close to when he's about to die.
Yeah, I think it's like when shit is starting to go off the rails and we see that, okay, Pastor Patrick has actually been acting under these parents' orders and the mom is really worried about her son's soul and the dad is kind of like, how much is this going to cost? And you think, okay, well, these parents are not, obviously, they're not super great. They sent their child to a conversion therapy camp. But
right.
It was interesting to get that background knowledge. I didn't really feel like it gave me too much that I didn't already know, except to reinforce that Pastor Patrick wasn't acting on his own orders.
Right. Like he is
or
trying to help.
Or at least not exclusively. Sorry.
Yeah, like he is trying to help the parents here.
Well, yes. The parents definitely signed up for this.
Yeah, but I guess it felt odd that we get that, but then we don't get really like their reaction to their son's death.
Yeah, because he fully gets brought into the police station and he's questioned. He has to essentially blackmail his friend who's on the force to get out of here. And then I did love that he ends up being sequestered back in the cabin because it's the only sort of safe place. They can't send him anywhere else and he obviously can't go home. So that was kind of satisfying.
Yeah. But yeah, nevertheless, I mean, I think this is definitely worth a watch. It's a slight recommend for me. I think I wound up giving this a 3 out of 5. But
yeah, I'm about there too.
But the way it distinguishes itself, I really, really, really appreciated.
Yeah, just something a little bit different. We are having a bit of a run, so it's something of a trend for 2024, I guess. I don't know. Part of me wants to wait until the end of the year and maybe do some kind of retrospective of like, why did we suddenly all decide to make these movies this year? Like, is there something happening in the water?
I don't know. And maybe it'll be a thing where I mean, what's like any trend, you know, like in 5 years, we'll look back and be like, well, what was going on at that time period, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really done any research, but I don't think that anything has changed in terms of conversion therapy or aversion therapy laws. Like, we've talked about this in a couple of other instances, and, you know, the situation's not great in the States. It's a little bit better here in Canada, but obviously these places do still exist. I guess I just don't understand why a bunch of people are suddenly latching on that, oh, there's horror potential to be explored here, unless they all watched They/Them and said, oh, I can do it better.
Which, honestly, if it's as simple as that, go y'all.
It could be. Yeah. Look at a big film and say, well, that didn't work. Let me try it my way.
Yeah. And I would argue we still haven't had a home run, but we're getting there.
Getting there. Interesting diversions.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, let us know what you thought of this film. But until next Microqueers, whenever we decide to do this again, we can cross out The Exorcism of Saint Patrick.
Indeed, and cross out Microqueers.